Blood shadows into dust. Chapter 1, The Trick of Fate. In the distant ancient rivers and lakes, there is a hidden mountain range called Thousand Evil Peaks. This mountain range is shrouded in fog all year round, and the sun is not seen all year round. Only those cultivators who have reached the threshold of the master and have an extraordinary background can climb this mountain. There is a sect called Bixia Pavilion hidden here, which has never been concerned about the world, concentrating on cultivation and teaching internal strength, and the disciples are all strong in martial arts. However, in this inconspicuous mountain range, there was a young man named Shen Muking, whose background was destined for his life to be bumpy. Shen Muking's story began when he was not yet born. 17 years ago, a fire burned his parents to death, and the family was wiped out overnight. He was abducted by lawbreakers and taken to the Qinglu and sold for profit. At that time, Shen Muking was only 3 years old, and his immature face and undeveloped body made him look powerless. The bullies and the women in the green building saw him as a tool for selfish gain, and even as a commodity exchange, forcing him to live countless dark days. Fate didn't seem to be kind to him, until one day, as he was lying in a cold corner, ready to endure the next infestation, suddenly a light broke through the sky. At that time, the head of Bixia Pavilion, the sword eyebrows and starry eyes, and the extremely handsome master Yun Luhan, led the disciples of the sect to this green building. Yun Luhan saw Shen Muking's troubled appearance, and felt pity. He immediately drew his sword, defeated all the embarrassed people, rescued Shen Muking, and brought him back to Bixia Pavilion for adoption. Yun Luhan said to Shen Muking, "This son is gifted, and he should have a great achievement." However, these beautiful ideas were quickly shattered in reality. Chapter 2, The Disadvantage of Poor Talent. After Shen Muking became a disciple of Bixia Pavilion, his fate did not seem to have changed fundamentally. Although he has a worry-free life and is no longer abused by others, he has never been able to master the desirable martial arts. Master Yun Luhan did not despise him, and often taught patiently, but he never saw any glimmer of hope. Whether it is swordsmanship, fists and feet, or internal strength, Shen Muking has never been able to comprehend it. His roots are too poor, and his path to cultivation can be described as difficult. The juniors and disciples in the sect also began to sneer at him, treating him as the laughing stock of Bixia Pavilion. Among them, the meanest is the junior brother named Su Che. He is one of the geniuses of Bixia Pavilion, he is extremely talented, and he can master advanced swordsmanship and internal skills at a young age. He often laughed at Shen Muking, "How can a broken shoe that has been abducted and sold be the successor of Bixia Pavilion?" He often made these ridiculous remarks in front of the master, and the other disciples followed suit. Shen Muking endured these insults, and couldn't help but feel a sense of powerlessness in his heart. He knew that his fate might have been sealed, and no matter how hard he tried, he would never be able to surpass those talented brothers and sisters. The days passed, and Shen Muking spent it in inferiority and struggle. He didn't have an amazing talent for martial arts, and he couldn't win the praise of his master, and the only thing he could do was to silently endure all the ridicule and humiliation. Chapter 3, The Demon Venerable in the Shadows. Just when Shen Muking almost gave up all hope, a dark shadow quietly appeared. It was a figure known as the Demon Venerable, named Feng Yuch. The appearance of Feng Yuch brought countless disasters and killings. He ruled countless regions with great power and insidious means, and even the major sects feared him. One day, Feng Yuch appeared at the mountain gate of Bixia Pavilion, sneered and said to Yun Luhan, "Your Bixia Pavilion is just a small fight, how about I use this beauty to warm the bed today?" Yun Luhan frowned, and said in a deep voice, "If the Demon Venerable is here, just to make such an unreasonable trouble, there is no need to say more. If you dare to hurt me Bixia Pavilion alone, I will make you pay." However, the Demon Venerable didn't care about Yun Luhan's threat, his gaze looked directly at Shen Muking, and a trace of excitement flashed in his eyes, "This person is with me. You see that he doesn't seem to have much joy, but if you take him in, it might bring some fun." This sentence was like a sharp knife, cutting through Shen Muking's heart. He knew that he was already powerless to resist the threat of this Demon Venerable. But at this moment, a strange fire suddenly ignited in his heart, this powerlessness and humiliation made him unable to bear it any longer. Chapter 4, The Opportunity of Death and Rebirth. In the end, Demon Venerable Feng Yuch really showed no mercy and personally took action, seriously injuring Shen Muking. He broke Shen Muking's chest with one palm and beat him to death. Shen Muking watched him gradually lose consciousness, and his mind still echoed with the ridicule of those juniors and his own incompetent self-mockery. At the moment of Shen Muking's death, it was as if a ray of light passed through his soul. After his death, he did not completely dissipate, but was pulled by a powerful force, and he was taken to a strange place, a mysterious realm full of blood and flowers. There, he met Yun Luhan, and there was also a mysterious being named Shadow God Monarch. This existence told Shen Muking that death was not the end, but the beginning of rebirth. The power of the Demon Venerable was pulling him into endless darkness, and Shen Muking's fate was at a turning point. Chapter 5, The Choice of Fate. Shen Wuking finally woke up, but this time, he was no longer the incompetent and humiliated teenager he once was. There was an infinite power in his body that he had never discovered. He began to have the ability to master power, and this power came from the mysterious power bestowed upon him by the Shadow God King. He knew that this was the last chance, and if he didn't seize it, he would be drowned in darkness forever. His fate will be in his own hands, and this time, he will no longer submit to anyone. Shen Wuking stood up, his eyes were firm, and he decided to start a life and death duel with the demon venerable. However, things have changed dramatically. His former enemies have now become his only allies, and those former colleagues have become his greatest threat. Shen Wuking's fate has finally come to a new peak, and all this is only the beginning of a bigger mystery. Chapter 6, The Echo of Darkness. Shen Wuking's rebirth was not a perfect liberation, on the contrary, it brought him into a more complex and dangerous world. The mysterious power in his body makes him feel unusually powerful, but this power is not an unconditional gift. Every time he used this power, the darkness in his heart gradually expanded, like an invisible claw, secretly stirring in the depths of his heart. However, Shen Wuking is no longer the incompetent teenager he was at the beginning. He understands that true freedom can only be achieved by taking control of his own destiny. Ignoring the uneasiness and darkness in his heart, he firmly chose to leave his fate in his own hands, rather than being controlled by outside forces. Under his determination, Shen Wuking began to cultivate hard, and gradually became able to control this power from the shadows. He didn't want to let this force control him, but used it as a sword to carve out a path for himself. Day after day, his martial arts gradually improved, and the darkness in his heart was like a silent volcano that could erupt at any moment. At the same time, the threat of the demon venerable Sealing Yuch is also getting more and more imminent. Although Shen Wuking had already died once, he knew that he could not go back to the past, and this river and lake was still full of countless dangers. His identity has undoubtedly become a thorn in the side of the demon venerable, and no matter how hard he tries, the demon venerable will always somehow drive him into a corner. Chapter 7, The Demon Venerable's Conspiracy. The existence of the demon venerable Feng Yuch is like a huge shadow in the rivers and lakes, and no one can escape. When he found out that Shen Wuking had not completely disappeared, he began to plan how to truly devour him. Feng Yuch didn't just want to kill Shen Wuking, but hoped to subdue him and turn him into his pawn. In this way, he would be able to use the mysterious power in Shen Wuking's body to open the door to a higher level of darkness and control more power. One day, Feng Yuch took a large group of followers and came to Bixia Pavilion in person. The purpose of his trip was clear, to find Shen Wuking and bring him back. Yun Luhan had already sensed the demon venerable's conspiracy and immediately contacted all the Bixia Pavilion disciples to prepare for the battle. However, the demon venerable's strength far exceeded their expectations. When Feng Yuch appeared at the mountain gate of Bixia Pavilion, the entire mountain gate was instantly enveloped by a black aura, and the air was filled with a thick murderous aura. Shen Wuking felt this terrifying pressure from the demon venerable, and he knew that his fate was once again related to this person. When Feng Yuch approached, Shen Wuking forcibly endured the irritability and fear in his heart and looked directly at the other party. Feng Yuch smiled slightly, his eyes were like knives. Shen Wuking, I know that you are a somewhat scheming character. You can choose to join me and become a sword in my hands, or you can choose to die and let me erase you completely. Which path will you choose? Shen Wuking's eyes were cold, and his tone was flat. Demon Venerable, have you ever thought that I don't need you to decide my fate at all? Oh. Feng Yuch seemed to be interested in this answer. Well, I'd love to see if you can really escape my palm. At the same time as Demon Venerable's tone fell, the sword blade in his hand suddenly let out a piercing scream and stabbed towards Shen Wuking. In an instant, Shen Wuking's body reacted, the air around his body seemed to freeze, and with a sneer, the hidden shadow power on his body quietly erupted, and the invisible power quickly condensed into a deep black sword chi. The sword chi was like a black hole, swallowing up the air around it. Shen Wuking's figure suddenly disappeared, and instantly appeared behind the Demon Venerable, and the sword chi in his hand slashed towards the Demon Venerable without hesitation. Feng Yuch only had time to turn around, and the moment he greeted the sword chi, a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. The threat of this force made him have to defend with all his strength, and his body was instantly wrapped in a dark protective shield, but Shen Wuking's sword chi was still surging like a torrent, instantly tearing through the protective shield and slashing towards his body. Sure enough, it's the broken shoe that was sold, and he still has some ability. The corners of Feng Yuch's mouth were slightly hooked, and it seemed that in this battle, he not only did not have a trace of fear, but aroused some kind of excitement. Chapter 8, Breaking the Game and Choosing Ones. The duel between the two instantly became white-hot, and the forces of darkness and light were intertwined. Shen Wuking's sword chi was like a ghost in the dark night, with every move and every style changing, condensing the largest explosion of mysterious power in his body. And the Demon Venerable Feng Yuch showed its incomparably powerful power, and the black demonic chi was like an endless abyss, devouring everything. However, Shen Wuking failed to defeat Feng Yuch after all. Even if his strength is strong, there is still a huge gap compared to an existence like Feng Yuch. Between an attack and defense, Shen Wuking was hit in the chest by a palm from the demon venerable, flew out in an instant, and fell heavily to the ground. How, is this kind of power not enough? Feng Yuch approached step by step, with a sneer on his face. Shen Wuking reluctantly raised his head in pain, a determined flame burning in his eyes. I won't give up this battle easily. Even if I die, I won't let you succeed. This sentence, like a huge force, made the surrounding air vibrate again. Although the disciples of Yun Luhan and Bixia Pavilion were powerless to resist the demon venerable, their hearts were still full of faith and support for Shen Wuking. They knew that this disciple, who was once regarded as incompetent, was using his own way to change the pattern of the entire rivers and lakes. Just when the demon venerable was about to launch a fatal blow, the power in Shen Wuking's body exploded again, and countless shadows wrapped around him. This time, he was no longer just passively defending, but taking the initiative to attack. He took a deep breath and his eyes were sharp. Feng Yuch, you are destined not to succeed easily today. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 9, The Communion of the Heart. Shen Wuking's counterattack made the whole battle situation extremely delicate. Just as he was about to go all out, a huge wave suddenly set off in his heart. He began to wonder if he could really get out of this dark cage, if he could really get rid of the control of the demon venerable. However, at this moment of life and death, Shen Wuking chose to face his heart. He no longer fought just for revenge, but for himself, for all that he held dear, including his master, his brother, and his long-lost self. He knows that only by breaking the shackles of the past can he truly be free.